Relax and listen to the voice. Little Red Cap, otherwise known as Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time there lived a dear and little girl who was loved by everyone who looked at her, but most of all by her grandmother, and there was nothing that she would not have given to the child. Once she gave her a little cap of red velvet, which suited her so well that she would never wear anything else, so she was always called Little Red Cap. One day her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Cap, here's a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take them to your grandmother. She's ill and weak, and they will do her good. Set out before it gets hot, and when you're going, walk nicely and quietly and do not run off of the path, or you may fall and break the bottle, and then your grandmother will get nothing. And when you go into her room, don't forget to say good morning, and don't peep into every corner before you do it." "I will take great care," said Little Red Cap to her mother, and gave her hand on it. The grandmother lived out in the wood, half a league from the village, and just as Little Red Cap entered the wood, a wolf met her. Red Cap did not know what a wicked creature he was, and was not at all afraid of him. "Good day, Little Red Cap," said he. "Thank you kindly, wolf." "Whither away so early, Little Red Cap?" "To my grandmother's." "What have you got in your apron?" "Cake and wine. Yesterday was baking day, so poor sick grandmother is to have something good to make her stronger." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Cap?" "A good quarter of a league further into the wood. Her house stands under the 3 large oak trees. The nut trees are just below. You surely must know it," replied Little Red Cap. The wolf thought to himself, "What a tender young creature, what a nice plump mouthful. She would be better to eat than the old woman. I must act craftily so as to catch both." So he walked for a short time by the side of Little Red Cap, and then he said, "See, Little Red Cap, how pretty the flowers are about here. Why do you not look around? I believe, too, that you do not hear how sweetly the little birds are singing. You walk gravely along as if you were going to school, while everything else out here in the wood is merry." Little Red Cap raised her eyes, and when she saw the sunbeams dancing here and there through the trees, and the pretty flowers growing everywhere, she thought, "Suppose I take grandmother a fresh nosegay. That would please her too. It's so early in the day that I shall still get there in good time." And so she ran from the path into the wood to look for flowers, and whenever she picked one, she fancied that she saw a still prettier one further on, and ran after it, and so got deeper and deeper into the wood. Meanwhile, the wolf ran straight to the grandmother's house and knocked at the door. "Who is there?" "Little Red Cap," replied the wolf. "She's bringing cake and wine. Open the door." "Lift the latch," called out the grandmother. "I'm too weak and cannot get up." The wolf lifted the latch, the door sprung open, and without saying a word, he went straight to the grandmother's bed and devoured her. Then he put on her clothes, dressed himself in her cap, laid himself in bed, and drew the curtains. Little Red Cap, however, had been running about picking flowers, and when she had gathered so many that she could carry no more, she remembered her grandmother, and set out to her. She was surprised to find the cottage door standing open, and when she went into the room, she had such a strange feeling that she said to herself, "Oh dear, how uneasy I feel today, and at other times I like being with grandmother so much." She called out, "Good morning," but received no answer, so she went to the bed and drew back the curtains. There lay her grandmother, with her cap pulled far over her face, and looking very strange. "Oh, grandmother," she said, "what big ears you have." "The better to eat you with, my child," was the reply. "But grandmother, what big eyes you have," she said. "The better to see you with, my dear." "But grandmother, what large hands you have." "The better to hug you with." "Oh, but grandmother, what a terrible big mouth you have." "The better to eat you with." And scarcely had the wolf said this, than with one bound he was out of bed and swallowed up Red Cap. When the wolf had appeased his appetite, he lay down again in the bed, fell asleep, and began to snore very loud. The huntsman was just passing the house and thought to himself, "How the old woman is snoring! I must just see if she wants anything." So he went into the room, and when he came to the bed, he saw that the wolf was lying in it. "Do I find you here, you old sinner?" said he. "I have long sought you." Then, just as he was going to fire at him, it occurred to him that the wolf might have devoured the grandmother, and that she might still be saved. So he did not fire, but he took a pair of scissors and began to cut open the stomach of the sleeping wolf. When he had made 2 snips, he saw the little red cap shining, and then he made 2 snips more, and the little girl sprang out, crying, "Ah, how frightened I've been! How dark it was inside the wolf!" And after that, the aged grandmother came out alive also, but scarcely able to breathe. Redcap, however, quickly fetched great stones with which they filled the wolf's belly, and when he awoke, he wanted to run away, but the stones were so heavy that he collapsed at once and fell dead. Then all 3 were delighted. The huntsman drew off the wolf's skin and went home with it. The grandmother ate the cake and drank the wine which Redcap had brought, and revived, but Redcap thought to herself, "As long as I live, I will never by myself leave the path to run into the wood when my mother has forbidden me to do so." It is also related that once, when Redcap was again taking cakes to the old grandmother, another wolf spoke to her and tried to entice her from the path. Redcap, however, was on her guard and went straight forward on her way, and told her grandmother that she had met the wolf, and that he had said good morning to her, but with such a wicked look in his eyes that if they had not been on the public road, she was certain he would have eaten her right up. "Well," said the grandmother, "we will shut the door that he may not come in." Soon afterwards, the wolf knocked and cried, "Open the door, grandmother. I am a little Redcap, and I'm bringing you some cakes." But they did not speak or open the door, so the graybeard stole twice or thrice around the house, and at last jumped on the roof, intending to wait until Redcap went home in the evening, and then to steal after her and devour her in the darkness. The grandmother saw what was in his thoughts. In front of the house was a great stone trough, so she said to the child, "Take the pail, Redcap. I made some sausages yesterday. Carry the water in which I boiled them to the trough." Redcap carried until the great trough was quite full. Then the smell of the sausages reached the wolf, and he sniffed and peeped down, and at last stretched out his neck so far that he could no longer keep his footing, and he began to slip, and slipped down from the roof straight into the great trough, and was drowned. But Redcap went joyously home, and no one ever did anything to harm her again. The Singing Bone. In a certain country, there was once great lamentation over a wild boar that laid waste the farmers' fields, killed the cattle, and ripped up people's bodies with his tusks. The king promised a large reward to anyone who would free the land from this plague, but the beast was so big and strong that no one dared to go near the forest in which it lived. At last the king gave notice that whosoever should capture or kill the wild boar should have his only daughter as a wife. Now, there lived in the country 2 brothers, sons of a poor man, who declared themselves willing to undertake the hazardous enterprise. The elder, who was crafty and shrewd, out of pride. The younger, who was innocent and simple, from a kind heart. The king said, "In order that you may be the more sure of finding the beast, you must go into the forest from opposite sides." So the elder went in on the west side, and the younger in on the east. When the younger had gone a short way, a little man stepped up to him. He held in his hand a black spear and said, "I give you this spear because your heart is pure and good. With this, you can boldly attack the wild boar, and it will do you no harm." He thanked the little man, shouldered the spear, and went on fearlessly. Before long he saw the beast, which rushed at him, but he held the spear towards it, and in its blind fury it ran so swiftly against it that its heart was cloven in twain. Then he took the monster on his back and went homewards with it to the king. As he came out the other side of the wood, there stood at the entrance a house where people were making merry with wine and dancing. His elder brother had gone in here, and, thinking that after all, the boar would not run away from him, was going to drink until he felt brave. But when he saw his younger brother coming out of the wood, laden with his booty, his envious evil heart gave him no peace. He called out to him, "Come in, dear brother, rest and refresh yourself with a cup of wine." The youth, who suspected no evil, went in and told him about the good little man who had given him the spear wherewith he had slain the boar. The elder brother kept him there until the evening, and then they went away together, and when in the darkness they came to a bridge over a brook, the elder brother let the other go first, and when he was halfway across, he gave him such a blow from behind that he fell down dead. He buried him beneath the bridge, took the boar, and carried it to the king, pretending that he had killed it, whereupon he obtained the king's daughter in marriage. When his younger brother did not come back, he said, "The boar must have ripped up his body," and everyone believed it. But as nothing remains hidden from God, so this black deed also was to come to light. Years afterward, a shepherd was driving his herd across the bridge and saw lying in the sand beneath a snow-white little bone. He thought that it would make a good mouthpiece, so he clambered down, picked it up, and cut out of it a mouthpiece for his horn. But when he blew through it for the first time, to his great astonishment, the bone began of its own accord to sing, "Ah, friend, thou blowest upon my bone. Long have I lain beside the water. My brother slew me for the boar, and took for his wife the king's young daughter." "What a wonderful horn," said the shepherd. "It sings by itself. I must take it to my lord the king." And when he came with it to the king, the horn again began to sing its little song. The king understood it all, and caused the ground below the bridge to be dug up, and then the whole skeleton of the murdered man came to light. The wicked brother could not deny the deed, and was sewn up in a sack and drowned. After which, the bones of the murdered man were laid to rest in a beautiful tomb within the churchyard. The Devil with the 3 Golden Hairs. There once was a poor woman who gave birth to a little son, and as he came into the world with a caul on, it was predicted that in his 14th year he would have the king's daughter for his wife. It happened that soon afterwards the king came into the village, and no one knew that he was the king, and when he asked the people what news there was, they answered, "A child has just been born with a caul on. Whatever anyone so born undertakes turns out well. It is prophesied, too, that in his 14th year he will have the king's daughter for his wife." The king, who had a bad heart and was angry about the prophecy, went to the parents, and seeming quite friendly, said, "You poor people, let me have your child, and I will take care of it." At first they refused, but when the stranger offered them a large amount of gold for it, and they thought, "It is a child of good fortune, and everything must turn out well for it," they at last consented, and gave them the child. The king put it in the box and rode away with it until he came to a deep piece of water. Then he threw the box into it and thought, "I have freed my daughter from her undesired suitor." The box, however, did not sink, but floated like a boat, and not a drop of water made its way inside of it. And it floated to within 2 miles of the king's chief city, where there was a mill, and it came to a halt at the mill dam. A miller's boy, who by good luck was standing there, noticed it and pulled it out with a hook, thinking that he had found a great treasure. But when he opened it, there lay a pretty boy inside, quite fresh and lively. He took him to the miller and his wife, and as they had no children, they were glad and said, "God has given him to us." They took great care of the foundling, and he grew up in all goodness. It happened that once in a storm, the king went into the mill, and asked the mill folk if the tall youth were their son. "No," answered they, "he's a foundling. 14 years ago he floated down to the mill dam in a box, and the mill boy pulled him out of the water." Then the king knew that it was none other than the child of good fortune, which he had thrown into the water, and he said, "My good people, could not the youth take a letter to the queen? I will give him 2 gold pieces as a reward." "Just as the king commands," answered they, and they told the boy to hold himself in readiness. Then the king wrote a letter to the queen, wherein he said, "As soon as the boy arrives with this letter, let him be killed and buried, and all must be done before I come home." The boy set out with this letter, but he lost his way, and in the evening came to a large forest. In the darkness he saw a small light. He went towards it, and he reached a cottage. When he went in, an old woman was sitting by the fire quite alone. She started when she saw the boy, and said, "Whence do you come, and whither are you going?" "I come from the mill," he answered, "and wish to go to the queen, to whom I am taking a letter, but as I have lost my way in the forest, I should like to stay here overnight." "You poor boy," said the woman, "you have come into a den of thieves, and when they come home they will kill you." "Let them come," said the boy. "I'm not afraid, but I am so tired that I cannot go any further," and he stretched himself upon a bench and rightfully fell asleep. Soon afterwards the robbers came and angrily asked what strange boy was lying there. "Ah," said the old woman, "it is an innocent child who has lost himself in the forest, and out of pity I have let him come in. He has to take a letter to the queen." The robbers opened the letter and read it, and in it was written that the boy, as soon as he arrived, should be put to death. Then the hard-hearted robbers felt pity, and their leader tore up the letter and wrote another, saying that as soon as the boy came, he should be married at once to the king's daughter. Then they let him lie quietly on the bench until the morning, and when he awoke, they gave him the letter and showed him the right way. And the queen, when she had received the letter and read it, did as was written in it, and had a splendid wedding feast prepared, and the king's daughter was married to the child of good fortune, and as the youth was handsome and friendly, she lived with him in joy and contentment. After some time the king returned to his palace and saw that the prophecy was fulfilled, and the child married to his daughter. "How has that come to pass?" said he. "I gave quite another order in my letter." So the queen gave him the letter, and said that he might see for himself what was written in it. The king read the letter, and saw quite well that it had been exchanged for the other. He asked the youth what had become of the letter entrusted to him, and why he had brought another instead of it. "I know nothing about it," answered he. "It must have been changed in the night when I slept in the forest." The king said in a passion, "You shall not have everything quite so much your own way. Whosoever marries my daughter must fetch me from hell 3 golden hairs from the head of the devil. Bring me what I want, and you shall keep my daughter." In this way the king hoped to be rid of him forever. But the child of good fortune answered, "I will fetch the golden hairs. I am not afraid of the devil." Whereupon he took leave of them, and he began his journey. The road led him to a large town, where the watchman by the gates asked him what his trade was, and what he knew. "I know everything," answered the child of good fortune. "Then you can do us a favor," said the watchman, "if you will tell us why our market fountain, which once flowed with wine, has become dry, and no longer gives even water." "That you shall know," answered he. "Only wait until I come back." Then he went further, and came to another town, and there also the gatekeeper asked him what was his trade, and what he knew. "I know everything," answered he. "Then you can do us a favor, and tell us why a tree in our town, which once bore golden apples, now does not even put forth leaves." "You shall know that," answered he. "Only wait until I come back." Then he went on and came to a wide river over which he must cross. The ferryman asked him what his trade was and what he knew. "I know everything," answered he. "Then you can do me a favor," said the ferryman, "and tell me why I must always be rowing backwards and forwards, and am never set free." "You shall know that," answered he. "Only wait until I come back." When he had crossed the water, he found the entrance to hell. It was black and sooty within, and the devil was not at home, but his grandmother was sitting in a large armchair. "What do you want?" she said to him, but she did not look so very wicked. "I should like to have 3 golden hairs from the devil's head," answered he, "else I cannot keep my wife." "That is a good deal to ask for," said she. "If the devil comes home and finds you, it will cost you your life. But as I pity you, I will see if I cannot help you." She changed him into an ant and said, "Creep into the folds of my dress. You will be safe there." "Yes," answered he, "so far so good. But there are 3 things beside that I want to know. Why a fountain which once flowed with wine has become dry, and no longer gives even water. Why a tree which once bore golden apples does not even put forth leaves, and why a ferryman must always be going backwards and forwards, and is never set free." "Those are difficult questions," answered she. "But just be silent and quiet, and pay attention to what the devil says when I pull out the 3 golden hairs." As the evening came on, the devil returned home. No sooner had he entered than he had noticed that the air was not pure. "I smell man's flesh," said he. "All is not right here." Then he pried into every corner and searched, but could not find anything. His grandmother scolded him. "It has just been swept," said she, "and everything put in order, and now you're upsetting it again. You've always got a man's flesh in your nose. Sit down and eat your supper." When he had eaten and drunk, he was tired, and laid his head in his grandmother's lap and told her she should louse him a little. It was not long before he was fast asleep, snoring and breathing heavily. Then the old woman took hold of a golden hair, pulled it out, and laid it down beside her. "Oh!" cried the devil. "What are you doing?" "I've had a bad dream," answered the grandmother, "so I seized hold of your hair." "What did you dream then?" said the devil. "I dreamt that a fountain in a marketplace from which wine once flowed was dried up, and not even water would flow out of it. What is the cause of it?" "Oh, if they did but know it," answered the devil. "There is a toad sitting under a stone in the well. If they killed it, the wine would flow again." The grandmother loused him again until he went to sleep and snored so loud that the window shook. Then she pulled the second hair out. "What are you doing?" cried the devil angrily. "Do not take it ill," she said. "I did it in a dream." "What have you dreamt this time?" asked the devil. "I dreamt that in a certain kingdom there stood an apple tree which had once borne golden apples, but now would not even bear leaves. What think you was the reason?" "Oh, but if they did know," answered the devil. "A mouse is gnawing at the root. If they killed it, they would have golden apples again. But if it gnaws much longer, the tree will wither altogether. But I have enough of your dreams. If you disturb me in my sleep again, you will get a box on the ear." The grandmother spoke gently to him and picked his lice once more until he fell asleep and snored. Then she took hold of the third golden hair and pulled it out. The devil jumped up, roared out, and would have treated her ill if she had not quieted him again and said, "Who can help bad dreams?" "What was the dream then?" asked he, and was quite curious. "I dreamt of a ferryman who complained that he must always ferry from one side to the other, and was never released. What is the cause of it?" The fool," answered the devil. "When anyone comes and wants to go across, he must put the oar in his hand, and the other man will have to ferry, and he will be free." As the grandmother had plucked out the 3 golden hairs, and the 3 questions were answered, she let the old devil alone, and he slept until daybreak. When the devil had gone out again, the old woman took the ant out of the folds of her dress, and gave the child of good fortune his human shape again. "There are the 3 golden hairs for you," said she. "What the devil said to your 3 questions, I suppose you heard." "Yes," answered he, "I heard, and I will take care to remember." "You have what you want, and now you can go on your way." He thanked the old woman for helping him in his need, and left hell well content that everything had turned out so fortunately. When he came to the ferryman, he was expected to give the promised answer. "Ferry me across first," said the child of good fortune, "and then I will tell you how you can be set free." And when he reached the opposite shore, he gave him the devil's advice. "Next time anyone comes who wants to be ferried over, just put the oar in his hand." He went on and came to the town wherein stood the unfruitful tree, and there too the watchman wanted an answer, so he told him what he had heard from the devil. "Kill the mouse which is gnawing at its root, and it will again bear golden apples." Then the watchman thanked him, and gave him as a reward 2 asses laden with gold, which followed him. Finally, he came to the town whose well was dry. He told the watchman what the devil had said. "A toad is in the well beneath a stone. You must find it and kill it, and the well will again give wine in plenty." The watchman thanked him, and also gave him 2 asses laden with gold. At last the child of good fortune got home to his wife, who was heartily glad to see him again, and to hear how well he had prospered in everything. To the king he took what he had asked for, the devil's 3 golden hairs, and when the king saw the 4 asses laden with gold, he was quite content, and said, "Now all the conditions are fulfilled. You can keep my daughter." But tell me, dear son-in-law, where did all that gold come from? This is tremendous wealth." "I was rowed across the river," answered he, "and got it there. It lies on the shore instead of sand." "Can I too fetch some of it?" said the king, and he was quite eager about it. "As much as you like," answered he. "There is a ferryman on the river. Let him ferry you over, and you can fill your sacks on the other side." The greedy king set out in all haste, and when he came to the river, he beckoned to the ferryman to put him across. The ferryman came and bade him to get in, and when they got to the other shore, he put his oar in the hand of the king and sprang over. From this time forth, the king had to ferry, as a punishment for his sins. Perhaps he is ferrying still. If he is, it is because no one has taken the oar from him. The Girl Without Hands. A certain miller had little by little fallen into poverty, and had nothing left but his mill and a large apple tree behind it. Once, when he had gone into the forest to fetch wood, an old man stepped up to him who he had never seen before, and said, "Why do you plague yourself with cutting wood? I will make you rich, if you will promise me what is standing behind your mill." "What can that be but my apple tree?" thought the miller, and said, "Yes," and gave a written promise to the stranger. He, however, laughed mockingly and said, "When 3 years have passed, I will come and carry away what belongs to me," and then he went. When the miller got home, his wife came to meet him and said, "Tell me, miller, from whence comes this sudden wealth into our house? All at once every box and chest was filled. No one brought it in, and I know not how it happened." He answered, "It comes from a stranger who met me in the forest and promised me a great treasure. I, in return, have promised him what stands behind the mill. We can very well give him the big apple tree for it." "Oh, husband," said the terrified wife, "that must have been the devil. He did not mean the apple tree, but our daughter, who was standing behind the mill, sweeping the yard." The miller's daughter was a beautiful, pious girl, and lived through the 3 years in the fear of God and without sin. When therefore the time was over, and the day came when the evil one was to fetch her, she washed herself clean, and made a circle around herself with chalk. The devil appeared quite early, but he could not come near to her. Angrily he said to the miller, "Take all water away from her, that she may no longer be able to wash herself, for otherwise I have no power over her." The miller was afraid and did so. The next morning the devil came again, but she had wept on her hands, and they were quite clean. Again he could not get near her, and furiously said to the miller, "Cut her hands off, or else I have no power over her." The miller was shocked, and answered, "How could I cut off my own child's hands?" Then the evil one threatened him, and said, "If you do not do it, you are mine, and I will take you yourself." The father became alarmed, and promised to obey him. So he went to the girl and said, "My child, if I do not cut off your hands, the devil will carry me away, and in my terror I have promised to do it. Help me in my need, and forgive me the harm that I do you." She replied, "Dear father, do with me what you will. I am your child." Thereupon she laid down both of her hands, and let them be cut off. The devil came for the 3rd time, but she had wept for so long and so much onto the stumps, that after all of that they were quite clean, and he had to give in, and he had lost all rights over her. The miller said to her, "I have by means of you received such great wealth that I will keep you most handsomely as long as you live." But she replied, "Here I cannot stay. I will go forth. Compassionate people will give me as much as I require." Thereupon she caused her maimed arms to be bound to her back, and by sunrise she had set out on her way, and walked the whole day until night fell. Then she came to a royal garden, and by the shimmering of the moon she saw the trees covered with beautiful fruits grew in it, but she could not enter, for it was surrounded by water. And as she had walked the whole day and not eaten one mouthful, and hunger tormented her, she thought, "Ah, if I were but inside that, I might eat of the fruit, else I might die of hunger." Then she knelt down, called on God the Lord, and prayed. Suddenly an angel came towards her, who made a dam in the water, so that the moat became dry, and she could walk through it. And now she went into the garden, and the angel went with her. She saw a tree covered with beautiful pears, but they were all counted. Then she went to them, and to still her hunger, ate one with her mouth from the tree, but no more. The gardener was watching, but as the angel was standing by, he was afraid and thought the maiden was a spirit, and was silent. Neither did he dare to cry out or to speak to the spirit. When she had eaten the pear, she was satisfied, and went and concealed herself among the bushes. The king, to whom the garden belonged, came down to it next morning, and counted, and saw that one of the pears was missing, and asked the gardener what had become of it, as it was not lying beneath the tree, but was gone. Answered the gardener, "Last night a spirit came in, who had no hands, and ate off of one of the pears with its mouth." The king said, "How did the spirit get over the water, and where did it go after it had eaten the pear?" The gardener answered, "Someone came in a snow-white garment from heaven who made a dam, and kept back the water, that the spirit might walk through the moat. And as it must have been an angel, I was afraid, and asked no questions, and I did not cry out. When the spirit had eaten the pear, it went back again." The king said, "If it be as you say, I will watch with you tonight." When it grew dark, the king came into the garden, and brought a priest with him, who was able to speak to the spirit. All three seated themselves beneath the tree and watched. At midnight the maiden came creeping out of the thicket, went to the tree, and again ate one pear off of it with her mouth, and beside her stood the angel in white garments. Then the priest went out to them and said, "Do you come from heaven or from earth? Are you a spirit or a human?" She replied, "I am no spirit, but an unhappy mortal, deserted by all but God." The king said, "If you are forsaken by all the world, yet will I not forsake you?" He took her with him into his royal palace, and as she was so beautiful and good, he loved her with all of his heart, had silver hands made for her, and took her to wife. After a year, the king had to go on a journey, so he committed his young queen to the care of his mother and said, "If she is brought to childbed, take care of her, nurse her well, and tell me of it at once in a letter." Then she gave birth to a fine boy. So the old mother made haste to write and announce the joyful news to him. But the messenger rested by a brook on the way, and as he was fatigued by the great distance, he fell asleep. Then along came the devil, who was always seeking to injure the good queen, and exchanged the letter for another, in which was written that the queen had brought a monster into the world. When the king read the letter, he was shocked and much troubled, but he wrote in answer that they were to take great care of the queen, and nurse her well until his arrival. The messenger went back with the letter, but rested at the same place, and again fell asleep. Then came the devil once more, and put a different letter in his pocket, in which it was written that they were to put the queen and her child to death. The old mother was terribly shocked when she received the letter, and could not believe it. She wrote back again to the king, but received no other answer, because each time the devil substituted a false letter, and in the last letter it was also written that she was to preserve the queen's tongue and eyes as a token that she had obeyed. But the old mother wept to think such innocent blood should be shed, and she had a hind brought by night, and cut out her tongue and eyes, and kept them. Then she said to the queen, "I cannot have you killed as the king commands, but here you may stay no longer. Go forth into the wide world with your child, and never come back here again." The poor woman tied her child on her back, and went away with eyes full of tears. She came into a great wild forest, and then she fell on her knees and prayed to God, and the angel of the Lord appeared to her, and led her to a little house on which was a sign with the words, "Here all dwell free." A snow-white maiden came out of the little house and said, "Welcome, lady queen," and conducted her inside. Then she unbound the little boy from her back, and held him to her breast, that he might feed, and laid him in a beautifully made little bed. Then said the poor woman, "From whence do you know that I was a queen?" The white maiden answered, "I am an angel sent by God to watch over you and your child." The queen stayed 7 years in the little house, and was well cared for, and by God's grace, because of her piety, her hands which had been cut off grew back once more. At last the king came home again from his journey, and his first wish was to see his wife and the child. Then his aged mother began to weep and said, "You wicked man, why did you write to me that I was to take those 2 innocent lives?" And she showed him the 2 letters which the evil one had forged, and then continued, "I did as you bade me," and she showed the tokens, the tongue and eyes. Then the king began to weep for his poor wife and his little son so much more bitterly than she was doing, that the aged mother had compassion on him and said, "Be at peace. She still lives. I secretly caused the hind to be killed and took these tokens from it. But I bound the child to your wife's back and bade her to go forth into the wide world and made her promise never to come back here again because you were so angry with her." Then spoke the king, "I will go as far as the sky is blue, and I will neither eat nor drink until I have found again my dear wife and my child, if in the meantime they have not been killed or died of hunger." Thereupon the king traveled about for 7 long years, and sought her in every cleft of the rocks and in every cave, but he found her not, and thought she had died of want. During the whole time he neither ate nor drank, but God supported him. At length he came into a great forest, and found therein a little house whose sign was, "Here all dwell free." Then forth came the white maiden, took him by the hand, led him in, and said, "Welcome, Lord King," and asked him from whence he came. He answered, "Soon shall I have traveled about for the space of 7 years, and I seek my wife and her child, but cannot find them." The angel offered him meat and drink, but he did not take anything, and only wished to rest a little. Then he lay down to sleep, and laid a handkerchief over his face. Thereupon the angel went into the chamber where the queen sat with her son, whom she usually called Sorrowful, and said to her, "Go out with your child, your husband is come." So she went to the place where he lay, and the handkerchief fell from his face. Then said she, "Sorrowful, pick up your father's handkerchief and cover his face again." The child picked it up and put it over his face again. The king, in his sleep, heard what passed, and had pleasure in letting the handkerchief fall once more. But the child grew impatient and said, "Dear mother, how can I cover my father's face when I have no father in this world? I have learnt to say the prayer, 'Our Father, which art in heaven.' You have told me that my father was in heaven, and was the good God, and how can I know a wild man like this? He is not my father." When the king heard that, he got up and asked who they were. Then said she, "I am your wife, and that is your son, Sorrowful." And he saw her living hands, and said, "My wife had silver hands." She answered, "The good God has caused my natural hands to grow again." And the angel went into the inner room, and brought the silver hands, and showed them to him. Hereupon he knew for certainty that it was his dear wife and his dear child, and he kissed them, and was glad, and said, "A heavy stone is fallen from off of my heart." Then the angel of God ate with them once again, and after that they went home to the king's aged mother. There were great rejoicings everywhere, and the king and queen were married again, and lived contentedly to their very happy end. The 3 Languages. An aged count once lived in Switzerland, who had only one son, but he was stupid and could learn nothing. Then said the father, "Hark you, my son, try as I will, I can get nothing into your head. You must go from here. I will give you into the care of a celebrated master, who shall see what he can do with you." The youth was sent into a strange town, and remained a whole year with the master. At the end of this time he came back home again, and his father asked, "Now, my son, what have you learnt?" "Father, I have learnt what the dogs say when they bark." "Lord have mercy on us," cried the father. "Is that all you have learnt? I will send you into another town, to another master." The youth was taken thither, and stayed a year with this master likewise. When he came back, the father again asked, "My son, what have you learnt?" He answered, "Father, I have learnt what the birds say." Then the father fell into a rage and said, "Oh, you lost man! You have spent the precious time and learnt nothing. Are you not ashamed to appear before my eyes? I will send you to a 3rd master, but if you learn nothing this time also, I will no longer be your father." The youth remained a whole year with his 3rd master also, and when he came home again, and his father inquired, "My son, what have you learned?" He answered, "Dear father, I have this year learned what the frogs croak." Then the father fell into the most furious anger, sprang up, called his people thither, and said, "This man is no longer my son. I drive him forth, and command you to take him out into the forest and kill him." They took him forth, but when they should have killed him, they could not do it for pity, and let him go. And they cut the eyes and the tongue out of a deer, that they might carry them to the old man as a token. The youth wandered on, and after some time came to a fortress where he begged for a night's lodging. "Yes," said the lord of the castle, "if you will pass the night down there in the old tower, go thither. But I warn you, it is at the peril of your life, for it is full of wild dogs, which bark and howl without stopping, and at certain hours a man has to be given to them, who they at once devour." The whole district was in sorrow and dismay because of them, and yet no one could do anything to stop this. The youth, however, was without fear, and said, "Just let me go down to the barking dogs, and give me something that I can throw to them. They will do nothing to harm me." As he himself would have it so, they gave him some food for the wild animals, and led him down to the tower. When he went inside, the dogs did not bark at him, but wagged their tails quite amicably around him, ate what he had set before them, and did not hurt one hair of his head. Next morning, to the astonishment of everyone, he came out again, safe and unharmed, and said to the lord of the castle, "The dogs have revealed to me, in their own language, why they dwell there, and bring evil on the land. They are bewitched, and they are obliged to watch over a great treasure which is below in a tower, and they can have no rest until it is taken away, and I have likewise learnt from their discourse how that is to be done." Then all who heard this rejoiced, and the lord of the castle said he would adopt him as a son if he accomplished it successfully. He went down again, and as he knew what he had to do, he did it thoroughly, and brought a chest full of gold out with him. The howling of the wild dogs was henceforth heard no more. They had disappeared, and the country was freed from the trouble. After some time he took it into his head that he would travel to Rome. On the way he passed by a marsh, in which a number of frogs were sitting and croaking. He listened to them, and when he became aware of what they were saying, he grew very thoughtful and sad. At last he arrived in Rome, where the Pope had just died, and there was a great doubt among the cardinals as to whom they should appoint as his successor. They at length agreed that the person should be chosen as Pope who should be distinguished by some divine and miraculous token, and just as that was decided on, the young count entered into the church, and suddenly 2 snow-white doves flew on his shoulders and remained sitting there. The ecclesiastics recognized therein the token from above, and asked him on the spot if he would be Pope. He was undecided, and knew not if he were worthy of this, but the doves counseled him to do it, and at length he said yes. He was anointed and consecrated, and thus was fulfilled what he had heard from the frogs on his way, which had so affected him that he was to be His Holiness of the Pope. Then he had to sing a mass, and did not know one word of it, but the 2 doves sat continuously on his shoulders, and they said it all into his ear. Clever Hans. The mother of Hans said, "Whither away, Hans?" Hans answered, "To Gretel." "Behave well, Hans." "Oh, I'll behave well. Goodbye, mother." "Goodbye, Hans." Hans comes to Gretel. "Good day, Gretel." "Good day, Hans. What do you bring that is good?" "I bring nothing. I want to have something given me." Gretel presents Hans with a needle. Hans says, "Goodbye, Gretel." "Goodbye, Hans." Hans takes the needle, sticks it into a hay cart, and follows the cart home. "Good evening, mother." "Good evening, Hans. Where have you been?" "With Gretel." "What did you take her?" "Oh, I took her nothing. I had something given to me." "What did Gretel give you?" "She gave me a needle." "Where is the needle, Hans?" "I stuck it into the hay cart." "That was ill done, Hans. You should have stuck the needle in your sleeve." "Never mind. I'll do better next time." "Whither away, Hans?" "To Gretel, mother." "Behave well, Hans." "Oh, I'll behave well. Goodbye, mother." "Goodbye, Hans." Hans comes to Gretel. "Good day, Gretel." "Good day, Hans. What do you bring that is good?" "I bring nothing. I want to have something given to me." Gretel presents Hans with a knife. "Goodbye, Gretel." "Goodbye, Hans." Hans takes the knife, sticks it in his sleeve, and goes home. "Good evening, mother." "Good evening, Hans. Where have you been?" "With Gretel." "What did you take her?" I took her nothing. She gave me something. Well, what did Gretel give you? She gave me a knife. Where is your knife, Hans? Well, I stuck it in my sleeve. Oh, that's ill done, Hans. You should have put the knife in your pocket. Never mind. I'll do better next time. Whither away, Hans? To Gretel, mother. Behave well, Hans. Oh, I'll behave well. Goodbye, mother. Goodbye, Hans. Hans comes to Gretel. Good day, Gretel. Good day, Hans. What good thing do you bring? Oh, I bring nothing. I want something given me. Gretel presents Hans with a young goat. Goodbye, Gretel. Goodbye, Hans. Hans takes the goat, ties its legs, and puts it in his pocket. When he gets home, it is suffocated. Good evening, mother. Good evening, Hans. Where have you been? With Gretel. What did you take her, Hans? Oh, I took nothing. She gave me something. What did Gretel give you? She gave me a goat. Where is this goat, Hans? Well, I put it in my pocket. Oh, that was ill done, Hans. You should have put a rope around the goat's neck. Never mind. I'll do better next time. Whither away, Hans? To Gretel, mother. Behave well, Hans. Oh, I'll behave well. Goodbye, mother. Goodbye, Hans. Hans again comes to Gretel. Good day, Gretel. Good day, Hans. What good thing do you bring? I bring nothing. I want something given to me. Gretel presents Hans with a piece of bacon. Goodbye, Gretel. Goodbye, Hans. Hans takes the bacon, ties it to a rope, and drags it away behind him. The dogs come and devour the bacon. When he gets home, he has the rope in his hand, and there is no longer anything hanging to it. Good evening, mother. Good evening, Hans. Where have you been? Well, with Gretel. What did you take her, Hans? Well, I took her nothing, but she gave me something. What did Gretel give you this time, Hans? She gave me a bit of bacon. Where's the bacon, Hans? Well, I tied it to a rope. I brought it home, but dogs took it. That was ill done, Hans. You should have carried the bacon on your head. Never mind. I will do better next time. Whither away, Hans? To Gretel, mother. Behave well, Hans. I'll behave well. Goodbye, mother. Goodbye, Hans. Hans comes to Gretel. Good day, Gretel. Good day, Hans. What good thing do you bring? I bring nothing, but I would have something given. Gretel presents Hans with a calf. Goodbye, Gretel. Goodbye, Hans. Hans takes the calf, puts it on his head, and the calf kicks his face. Good evening, mother. Good evening, Hans. Where have you been? With Gretel. What did you take her, Hans? Well, I took nothing, but I had something given to me. Well, what did Gretel give you? A calf. Where have you the calf, Hans? Well, I set it on my head, and it kicked my face. Oh, that was ill done, Hans. You should have led the calf and put it in a stall. Never mind. I'll do better next time. Whither away, Hans? To Gretel, mother. Behave well, Hans. I'll behave well. Goodbye, mother. Goodbye, Hans. Hans comes to Gretel. Good day, Gretel. Well, good day, Hans. What good thing do you bring? I bring nothing, but would have something given. Gretel says to Hans, I will go with you. Hans takes Gretel, ties her to a rope, leads her to the rack and binds her fast. Then Hans goes to his mother. Good evening, mother. Good evening, Hans. Where have you been? Well, with Gretel. Well, what did you take her? I took her nothing. Well, what did Gretel give you? Well, she gave me nothing. She came with me. Where have you left Gretel, Hans? Well, I led her by the rope, tied her to the rack, and scattered some grass for her. Well, that was ill done, Hans. You should have cast friendly eyes on her. Well, never mind. I'll do better. Hans went into the stable, cut out all the calves and sheep's eyes, and threw them in Gretel's face. Then Gretel became angry, tore herself loose and ran away, and was no longer the bride of Hans. Clever Elsie. There was once a man who had a daughter who was called Clever Elsie, and when she had grown up, her father said, "We will get her married." "Yes," said the mother, "if only someone would come who would have her." At length, a man came from a distance and wooed her, who was called Hans, but he stipulated that Clever Elsie should be really smart. "Oh," said the father, "she has plenty of good sense." And the mother said, "Oh, she can see the wind coming up the street and hear the flies coughing." "Well," said Hans, "if she's not really smart, I won't have her." When they were sitting at dinner and had eaten, the mother said, "Elsie, go into the cellar and fetch some beer." Then Clever Elsie took the pitcher from the well, went into the cellar, and tapped the lid briskly as she went, so that the time might not appear long. When she was below, she fetched herself a chair and set it before the barrel so that she had no need to stoop and did not hurt her back or do herself any unexpected injury. Then she placed the can before her and turned the tap, and while the beer was running, she would not let her eyes be idle, but looked up at the wall, and after much peering here and there, saw a pickaxe exactly above her, which the masons had accidentally left there. Then Clever Elsie began to weep and said, "If I get Hans, and we have a child, and he grows big, and we send him into the cellar here to draw beer, then the pickaxe will fall on his head and kill him." Then she sat and wept and screamed with all the strength of her body over the misfortune which lay before her. Those upstairs waited for the drink, but Clever Elsie still did not come. Then the woman said to the servant, "Just go down into the cellar and see where Elsie is." The maid went and found her sitting in front of the barrel, screaming loudly. "Elsie, why do you weep?" asked the maid. "Ah," she answered, "have I not reason to weep? If I get Hans, and we have a child, and he grows big, and he has to draw beer here, the pickaxe will perhaps fall on his head and kill him." Then said the maid, "What a clever Elsie we have," and sat down beside her, and began loudly to weep over the misfortune. After a while, as the maid did not come back, those upstairs were thirsty for the beer. The man said to the boy, "Just go downstairs into the cellar and see where Elsie and the girl are." The boy went down, and there sat Clever Elsie and the girl, both weeping together. Then he asked, "Why are you weeping?" "Ah," said Elsie, "have I not reason to weep? If I get Hans, and we have a child, and he grows big, and he has to draw beer here, the pickaxe will fall on his head and kill him." Then said the boy, "What a clever Elsie we have," and he sat down beside her, and likewise began to howl loudly. Upstairs they waited for the boy, but as he still did not return, the man said to the woman, "Just go down into the cellar and see where Elsie is." The woman went down and found all three in the midst of their lamentations, and inquired what was the cause. Then Elsie told her also that her future child was to be killed by the pickaxe when it grew big and had to draw beer, and the pickaxe fell down. Then said the mother likewise, "What a clever Elsie we have," and she sat down and wept with them as well. The man upstairs waited a short time, as his wife did not come back, and his thirst grew ever greater. He said, "I must go into the cellar myself and see where Elsie is." But when he got into the cellar, and they were all sitting together crying, and he heard the reason, and that Elsie's child was the cause, and that Elsie might perhaps bring one into the world some day, and that he might be killed by the pickaxe if he should happen to be sitting beneath it drawing beer just at the very time when it fell down, he cried, "Oh, what a clever Elsie," and sat down and likewise wept with him. The bridegroom stayed upstairs alone for a long time. Then, as no one would come back, he thought, "They must be waiting for me below. I too must go there and see what they are about." When he got down, the 5 of them were sitting, screaming and lamenting quite piteously, each outdoing the other. "What misfortune has happened, then?" he asked. "Ah, dear Hans," said Elsie, "if we marry each other and have a child, and he is big, and we perhaps send him here to draw something to drink, then the pickaxe which has been left up there might dash his brains out if it were to fall down, so have we not reason to weep?" "Come," said Hans, "more understanding than that is not needed for my household. As you are such a clever Elsie, I will have you." And he seized her hand, took her upstairs with him, and married her. After Hans had had her some time, he said, "Wife, I'm going out to work and earn some money for us. Go into the field and cut the corn that we may have some bread." "Yes, dear Hans, I will do that." After Hans had gone away, she cooked herself some good broth and took it into the field with her. When she came to the field, she said to herself, "What shall I do? Shall I cut first or shall I eat first? Oh, I will eat first." Then she drank her cup of broth, and when she was fully satisfied, she once more said, "What shall I do? Shall I cut first or shall I sleep first? I will sleep first." Then she lay down among the corn and fell asleep. Hans had been at home for a long time, but Elsie did not come. Then said he, "What a clever Elsie I have. She is so industrious that she does not even come home to eat." But when evening came, and she still stayed away, Hans went out to see what she had cut, but nothing was cut, and she was lying among the corn asleep. Then Hans hastened home, and brought a fowler's net with little bells, and hung it around about her, and she still went on sleeping. Then he ran home, shut the house door, and sat down in his chair and worked. At length, when it was quite dark, clever Elsie awoke, and when she got up there was a jingling all round about her, and the bells rang at each step which she took. Then she was alarmed, and became uncertain whether she really was clever Elsie or not, and said, "Is it I, or is it not I?" But she knew not what answer to make to this, and stood for a time in doubt. At length she thought, "I will go home and ask if it be I, or if it be not I. They will be sure to know." She ran to the door of her own house, but it was shut. Then she knocked at the window and cried, "Hans, is Elsie within?" "Yes," answered Hans, "she is within." Hereupon she was terrified and said, "Ah, heavens, then it is not I," and went to another door. But when the people heard the jingling of the bells, they would not open it, and she could get in nowhere. Then she ran out of the village, and no one has seen her ever since. Thumbling. There was once a poor peasant who sat in the evening by the hearth and poked the fire, and his wife sat and spun. Then said he, "How sad is it that we have no children? With us all is so quiet, and in other houses it is noisy and lively." "Yes," replied the wife, and sighed, "even if we had only one, and it were quite small, and only as big as a thumb, I should be quite satisfied, and we would still love it with all of our hearts." Now, it so happened that the woman fell ill, and after 7 months gave birth to a child that was perfect in all of its limbs, but no longer than a thumb. Then said they, "It is as we wished it to be, and it shall be our dear child," and because of its size they called it Thumbling. Though they did not let it want for food, the child did not grow taller, but remained as it had been at the first. Nevertheless, it looked sensibly out of its eyes, and soon showed itself to be a wise and nimble creature, for everything it did turned out well. One day the peasant was getting ready to go into the forest to cut wood, when he said, as if to himself, "How I wish that there was someone who could bring the cart to me." "Oh, father," cried Thumbling, "I will soon bring the cart. Rely on that. It shall be in the forest at the appointed time." The man smiled and said, "How can that be done? You're far too small to lead the horse by the reins." "Oh, that's of no consequence, father. If my mother will only harness it, I shall sit in the horse's ear and call out to him how he is to go." "Well," answered the man, "for once we will try it." When the time came, the mother harnessed the horse and placed Thumbling in its ear, and then the little creature cried, "Gee up, gee up!" Then it went quite properly, as if with its master, and the cart went the right way into the forest. It so happened that as he was turning a corner, and the little one was crying, "Gee up!" 2 strange men came towards him. "My word," said one of them, "what is this? There is a cart coming, and the driver is calling to the horse, and still he is not to be seen." "That can't be right," said the other. "We will follow the cart and see where it stops." The cart, however, drove right into the forest, and exactly to the place where the wood had been cut. When Thumbling saw his father, he cried to him, "Do you see, father? Here I am with the cart. Now take me down." The father got hold of the horse with his left hand, and with the right took his little son out of the horse's ear. Thumbling sat down quite merrily on a straw, but when the two strange men saw him, they did not know what to say for astonishment. Then one of them took the other aside and said, "Listen, the little fellow would make our fortune if we exhibited him in a large town for money. We will buy him." Then they went to the peasant and said, "Sell us that little man. He shall be well treated with us." "No," replied the father. "He is the apple of my eye, and all the money in the world cannot buy him from me." Thumbling, however, when he heard of the bargain, had crept up the folds of his father's coat, placed himself on the shoulder, and whispered in his ear, "Father, do give me away. I will soon come back again." Then the father parted with him to the two men for a handsome sum of money. "Where will you sit?" they said to him. "Oh, just set me on the rim of your hat, and then I can walk backwards and forwards and look at the country and still not fall down." They did as he wished, and when Thumbling had taken leave of his father, they went away with him. They walked until it was dusk, and then the little fellow said, "Do take me down. It is necessary." "Just stay up there," said the man on whose hat he sat. "It makes no difference to me. The birds sometimes let things fall on me." "No," said Thumbling. "I know what's manners. Take me quickly down." The man took his hat off and put the little fellow on the ground by the wayside, and he leapt and crept about a little between the sods, and then he suddenly slipped into a mouse hole which he had sought out. "Good evening, gentlemen. Just go home without me," he cried to them, and mocked them. They ran thither and stuck their sticks into the mouse hole, but it was all in vain. Thumbling crept still farther in, and as soon as it became quite dark, they were forced to go home with their vexation and their empty purses. When Thumbling saw that they were gone, he crept back out of the subterranean passage. "It is so dangerous to walk on the ground in the dark," said he. "How easily a neck or a leg is broken." Fortunately, he stumbled against an empty snail shell. "Thank God," said he, "in that I can pass the night in safety," and he got into it. Not long afterwards, when he was just going to sleep, he heard two men go by, and one of them was saying, "How shall we set about getting hold of the rich pastor's silver and gold?" "I could tell you that," cried Thumbling, interrupting them. "What was that?" said one of the thieves in fright. "I heard someone speaking." They stood still, listening, and Thumbling spoke again and said, "Take me with you, and I'll help you." "But where are you?" "Just look on the ground, and observe from whence my voice comes," he replied. There the thieves at length found him, and lifted him up. "You little imp, how will you help us?" they said. "Listen," said he, "I will creep into the pastor's room through the iron bars, and will reach out to you whatever you want to have." "Come then," they said, "and we will see what you can do." When they got to the pastor's house, Thumbling crept into the room, but instantly cried out with all of his might, "Do you want to have everything that is here?" The thieves were alarmed, and said, "But do speak softly, so as not to wake anyone." Thumbling, however, behaved as if he had not understood this, and cried again, "What do you want? Do you want to have everything that is here?" The cook, who slept in the next room, heard this, and sat up in bed and listened. The thieves, however, had, in their fright, run some distance away, but at last they took courage, and thought, "The little rascal wants to mock us." They came back and whispered to him, "Come on, be serious, and reach something out to us." Then Thumbling again cried as loudly as he could, "I really will give you everything. Just put your hands in." The maid, who was listening, heard this quite distinctly, and jumped out of bed and rushed to the door. The thieves took flight, and ran as if the wild huntsmen were behind them, but as the maid could not see anything, she went to strike a light. When she came to the place with it, Thumbling, unperceived, betook himself to the granary, and the maid, after she had examined every corner and found nothing, lay down in her bed again, and believed that, after all, she had only been dreaming with open eyes and ears. Thumbling had climbed up among the hay and found a beautiful place to sleep in. There he intended to rest until day, and then go home again to his parents. But there were other things in store for him. Truly, there was much worry and affliction in this world. When the day dawned, the maid arose from her bed to feed the cows. Her first walk was into the barn, where she laid hold of an armful of hay, and precisely that very one in which poor Thumbling was laying asleep. He, however, was sleeping so soundly that he was aware of nothing, and did not wake up until he was in the mouth of the cow, who had picked him up with the hay. "Oh, heavens!" cried he. "How have I got into the fulling mill?" but he soon discovered where he was. Then he had to take care not to let himself go between the teeth and be dismembered, but he was subsequently forced to slip down into the stomach with the hay. "In this little room the windows are forgotten," said he, "and no sun shines in, neither will a candle be brought." His quarters were especially unpleasing to him, and the worst was that more and more hay was always coming in by the door, and the space grew less and less. When at length, in his anguish, he cried as loud as he could, "Bring me no more fodder! Bring me no more fodder!" The maid was just milking the cow, and when she heard someone speaking, and saw no one, and perceived that it was the same voice that she had heard in the night, she was so terrified that she slipped off of her stool and spilt the milk. She ran in great haste to her master, and said, "Oh heavens, pastor, the cow has been speaking." "You are mad," replied the pastor, but he went himself to the byre to see what was there. Hardly, however, had he set foot inside when Thumbling again cried, "Bring me no more fodder! Bring me no more fodder!" Then the pastor himself was alarmed, and thought that an evil spirit had gone into the cow, and ordered the cow to be killed. The cow was killed, but the stomach in which Thumbling was thrown on the dunghill. Thumbling had great difficulty in working his way out. However, he succeeded so far as to get some room, but just as he was going to thrust his head out, a new misfortune occurred. A hungry wolf ran thither, and swallowed the whole stomach at one gulp. Thumbling did not lose courage. "Perhaps," thought he, "the wolf will listen to what I've got to say," and he called to him from out of his belly, "Dear wolf, I know of a magnificent feast for you." "Where is it to be had?" said the wolf. "In such and such a house. You must creep into it through the kitchen sink, and will find cakes and bacon and sausages and as much of them as you can eat." And he described to him exactly his father's house. The wolf did not require to be told this twice. He squeezed himself in at the night through the sink, and ate to his heart's content in a larder. When he had eaten his fill, he wanted to go out again, but he had become so big that he could not go out by the same way. Thumbling had reckoned on this, and now began to make a violent noise in the wolf's body, and raged and screamed as loudly as he could. "Will you be quiet?" said the wolf. "You will waken up the people." "What do I care?" replied the little fellow. "You've eaten your fill, and I will make merry likewise," and began once more to scream with all of his strength. At last his father and mother were aroused by it, and ran to the room and looked in through the opening in the door. When they saw that the wolf was inside, they ran away, and the husband fetched his axe, and the wife the scythe. "Stay behind," said the man, when they entered the room. "When I have given the blow, if he is not killed by it, you must cut him down and hew his body to pieces." Then Thumbling heard his parents' voices and cried, "Dear father, I am here, I am in the wolf's body." Said the father, full of joy, "Thank God, our dear child has found us again," and bade the woman to take away her scythe, that Thumbling might not be hurt with it. After that he raised his arm and struck the wolf such a blow on his head that he fell down dead, and then they got knives and scissors and cut open his body and drew the little fellow forth. "Ah," said the father, "what sorrow we have gone through for your sake." "Yes, father, I have gone about the world a great deal. Thank heaven I breathe fresh air again." "Where have you been then?" "Oh, father, I've been in a mouse's hole, in a cow's belly, and then in a wolf's paunch. Now I will stay with you." "And we will not sell you again. No, not for all the riches in the world," said his parents, and they embraced and kissed their dear Thumbling. They gave him to eat and to drink, and had some new clothes made for him, for his own had been spoiled on his long, arduous journey.